Welcome to Canada's podcast.
Raymond, welcome to Canada's podcast. We've seen you a couple of times in the last 3 weeks. But why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you're doing today, kind of thing, so that they can at least start from that perspective, and then we can get on to the journey, if you like.
Sure, it's great to be chatting with you, Philip. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been a founder of companies for the last, it must be 25 years. Time goes by fast when you're having fun. And so I've been a software entrepreneur and financial services entrepreneur. I've been a VC, ran a, successful venture capital fund. I've invested as an angel. So, I love, I'd say I love being an entrepreneur the most, more than being an investor. But I really care about entrepreneurs, working with entrepreneurs, their journey, their struggles. And today what I focus a lot of my time on is I run a company called Hockey Stick, which is really a fundraising platform. It's really designed to help small businesses and startups raise money. I'm the founder of a company called Flow Ventures, which is also in fundraising, but more specialty on the grants and loan side. And I work with a lot of entrepreneurs every day, every week on pitching. So, storytelling, pitching. I wrote a book last year, and I love working with entrepreneurs, hearing their pitch and helping them develop the story. Partly because I just get to hear their story, right? So selfishly, I just to sit back and hear and learn. But, if I can be useful and help an entrepreneur perfect their pitch, it just feels amazing to see them go from frustration and confusion. I just can't get my story straight and out there to, oh, now people understand what I do. And it's been helpful.
But, I get what you're saying, but I mean, you got a terrific education. You've bumped around finance and obviously bumped it into institutional finance, which in some ways is the antithesis of entrepreneurship.
Yes.
I'm not trying to be unfair, but
No.
It really sometimes is.
Yeah.
You grew up in that to a degree, I think. What made you move out into the other side of risk, if you like? I'm just curious on that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I didn't really grow up in this. I mean, I back when I was a kid, like my parents, they did try running some small businesses. They had a plumbing store. They had a convenience store. They had different things, and they ended up going into different careers after. But my original career was music. I was a classically trained musician, a pianist, a composer. And so I really started my first company having just graduated with an arts degree, right? So you could argue that I was the least qualified person, but except so many entrepreneurs I know have exactly the same, I have a degree in philosophy. I'm going to start a software company. And I think you're just as qualified to start a company as anybody. But if I understand your question, that my journey, it's really been about being on both sides of the table. So when you're an entrepreneur raising money, and by the way, it is absolutely frustrating and unfair, and we could talk about that all day.
Yeah.
It's unnecessarily unfair to have money to run a business. So I've struggled through that bit, getting turned down on a credit card loan. I've been turned down for every type of financing ever invented. And then running a fund and being an angel and, seeing the other side, it kind of filled in my perspective of why it's so frustrating, because a lot of the things that frustrate entrepreneurs about financing, they're different things on the other side, but the other side is also frustrated. Why can't I find those great companies? And so, I kind of still ended up on being an entrepreneur, but it's as a bit of a hybrid, that my focus now is I'm a founder, I'm an entrepreneur, but I help other entrepreneurs raise money and do those things that are going to help them be successful financially. I think the reason is just because it's very broken, frustrating, difficult. Odds are stacked against people. There, you go into, there's bias, gender bias, race bias. There's so many different things that if you looked at it from the outside, you'd think, oh, well, I guess the best companies get funded. And that's true some of the time, but it's not true many times.
I agree. But I mean, in a nutshell, what would you say, what for you, what's the best thing about being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, for me, it's about creativity, right? Maybe this is where, having been an artist before, and by the way, artists are not the exclusive owners of creativity. Athletes are creative. Business people are creative. Accountants are creative. Hopefully not too creative, but I think that for me, being an entrepreneur means there's so many, challenges and problems. You have to be creative to solve it, right? So there's so much uncertainty, and honestly, there are many days the uncertainty is very stressful and challenging and difficult, and you worry. But you have this, these creative moments where you see this problem. Maybe it's a financial problem. I'm running out of money, or a technological problem. I don't know how to build this product, and it's on day one, it's insurmountable. You have no idea how to fix it, and you basically convince yourself you're going to fail. But something happens in the second day where you have this creative leap where you think, oh, well, I didn't think about this. I'm going to try something. I'm going to call this person. I'm going to pitch at this competition, or I'm going to, call this client to try to close a sale. And then it happens. It works. So you almost do the impossible, and it's addictive, right? It's you start to see how powerful creativity is to solve problems, and I think that's the number one, the superpower of entrepreneurs, those who are able to do it, is to be creative.
So yeah, I think that's fair. Let's move on to some sort of, let's say, challenging questions, but questions about challenges. So let's move to the obvious one was what's the greatest challenge you've faced to date? And, how did you overcome it? I mean, not necessarily the detail, but the mindset that let you overcome it.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many, right? I could list so many challenges I have, even at today's challenges. But if I could, excuse me, pick one, I'd say that early in my career, like when I mentioned I graduated with a music degree and started a software company, and I remember it was both an exhilarating time, but a very difficult time where I really didn't know what I was doing. I had no real business training, and I had no access to money. Speaking of financing, like zero. So, barely a personal credit card, no bank loan, no investment. And I was running a consulting company, and it had to be profitable every 2 weeks because every 2 weeks was payroll. And I remember this, I actually, thinking back, I have no idea how we did it, but, it was this insurmountable challenge, and it wasn't just the money. I mean, a lot of entrepreneurs, every entrepreneur stresses out about money. I stress out about money. But back then it was really the feeling that I didn't feel that I could scale up my own knowledge fast enough. So even simple things like I didn't know anything about accounting. And I remember learning accounting through the QuickBooks help files. So I was sitting there doing my bookkeeping so we could do payroll and pay people. And I had no idea what a balance sheet was. So I go to the help file and I read up on a balance sheet, and that's how I learned accounting. But it was very challenging because, I felt that if I don't learn everything and learn it quickly, my business is going to fail and go to business. And that applied to sales and marketing and technology, and even what to wear at a meeting. I remember going to Ottawa, sitting down and pitching a government agency and being nervous because I was in a music degree. I used to wear black turtlenecks all day. So the idea of like, what should I wear? How early should I show up? And, these things that it just felt like an accelerated MBA.
Well, nowadays you meet tons of entrepreneurs funded and things like that. Maybe you can pass on some advice in terms of, maybe there's three things that you constantly find
Sure.
that people
Yeah.
people should fix before they see you, kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing I always tell people is, when people ask about advice, and I was asked recently about what's the number one piece of advice you have. And if I only could pick one, I'd say listen to less advice, including, for me right now, it's, entrepreneurs are magnets for advice, right? Your parents, your spouse, your customers, your team, everyone's going to give you advice. And you somewhat have to inoculate yourself against too much advice. Otherwise, you end up with this spaghetti monster of like, your strategy is just the combination of everyone's advice and you're trying to please everybody. And I'd say that, you have to sort of have your own point of view. I'm not saying be so stubborn that when somebody gives you really good advice, you don't listen, but I actually think that's maybe less of a problem. It's a bit of a cliche that entrepreneurs are so strong-willed and they don't listen. I actually see more entrepreneurs, especially when they're funding, like pitching for VCs, where they really, really want the money. They don't get the money and they get some advice, but it's very confusing advice. I just tell people, ignore it. Right? Not because that person wasn't smart and you shouldn't listen, but because it was a no. So if you didn't get a check and you got advice, the advice was really a no. So you put that in so I think my first thing I'd say is, be comfortable with your own point of view. It's better that you have your own point of view and you're wrong than you try to focus group your point of view and you'll never have one. The other thing I'd say is that, it's something I learned that I'm still learning because I like to multitask is you as a leader and as an entrepreneur, you can't do everything. You have to really kind of decide that there's certain things and everyone's different. So you might be more of a technology leader or sales leader or a people leader or strategy leader. You have to really focus on that thing that is going to define you as a leader and not try to do a little bit of everything. Right. I've certainly done that. I've been guilty of that. A little bit of accounting, a little bit of legal, a little bit of sales, a little bit of product, a little bit of tech, and so you going back to what I was saying is you feel you've got to learn everything and learning is great. But, the entrepreneurship attracts generalists. But if you only do a little bit of everything, you will not be an effective leader and you won't have any focus. So, again, going back to what I was saying, especially around pitching, when you pitch, you're just going to get so many types of feedback about everything that you think, well, if I only do those 50 things, I will be good, but it's not true, right? You just need to do the 2 or 3 things better than everybody else. And then your website can be crappy. The name of your company can be hard to pronounce. Your revenue model can be bad. All these things, your hair could be messy. Doesn't matter as long as you do those few things really well. And, that goes back to what I was saying about point of view.
You give a lot of advice.
Yeah.
Best piece of advice that you've had that you kind of carry around in your hip pocket there,
You mean that I've received?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I remember one.
I know you've
had
lots of advice, but there's usually 1 or 2 gems you never forget, kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in general, like the first one I got early in my career, many people kept saying you just need to focus, and it took me a long time to understand what that actually means. But I actually want to tell you one that I do carry around with me is a general. I won't tell you who it is, but a well-known, very successful entrepreneur, investor. This is like more than 10 years ago, but we were working together on something, and he just looked at me and said, Raymond, you always have so many intelligent things to say. You're like the smartest person in the room. You just haven't really hit it financially. You just haven't really succeeded financially yet. And he meant it in the most, I think the most generous, honest thing that he just said, you're so smart. Why aren't you more successful? And in one sense, it's brutal feedback. It hits to the core of entrepreneur shame. But it was really valuable to me because it allowed me to say, do I just want to be smart or do I want to be successful? Not that those are mutually exclusive, but, it allowed me to kind of say, what am I afraid of? And should I just say, what, actually, I want to be more financially successful. It is business after all. Mm-hmm. And I focused on, I wrote that down on my whiteboard kind of thing, and it worked. So it was so helpful to me And maybe, you know, that's an example of one other piece of advice I give people is it's not the advice, it's who's giving it. And you know, the advice I got was somebody who I trusted. He had a particular way of delivering it, which might be a bit, brutal for some people. I can handle it, but I knew where it was coming from. And so if people are getting a lot of advice, you know, try to understand where that advice is coming from. If the person is really committed to you, you know, their time, they're a mentor, they're a teacher, they're part of your team, even your spouse, maybe especially your spouse who's committed, that advice means a lot, right? Other ones, it's like theory crafting and talking and little Twitter things. You can probably discard those.
Let's get into some more fun questions. I think
those are already fun questions.
They're fun, yeah. Yeah, that was pretty impressive. I like that one, that response. If you weren't doing what you're doing now, what would you be doing? Would you be an artist, or can you be both?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely not be a musician. The world thanks me for that decision. I think I was like okay musician, but I think I would be probably a teacher. I mean, I do a lot of teaching now, and I, you know, both my parents were teachers. That's where it comes from. I just love that dynamic. You know, that kind of combination. It's scary and it's also really rewarding. So I think that would be, you know, probably sometime in my future. I probably, you know, write more. I love writing. It's also difficult and very rewarding. But, you know, maybe I would probably write more books, and that's kind of the way I learn. But I have a lot of interests, right? So I might, you know, open a restaurant or a hotel. I might, you know, I always think in my mind, I'll have other careers, and I probably will, but it's mostly because I'm just interested in a lot of things. That's definitely the best part of what I do. Right? I see thousands of entrepreneurs in a year, and so I get to be a little bit of a part of their lives and what they do without, you know, fully committing to it.
What's keeping you up at night?
Yeah, we're in an uncertain time, right? So, you know, we came through an uncertain time with COVID, and you know, I think just when it was like, yay, we made it, we win, back to normal, then we have lots of other issues, the economy and Ukraine and many things, and now, you know, real estate, like rising real estate prices, and, you know, all the standard things, but they're standard because they're things that human beings care about. So I think that we're entering, or we're continuing to be in an uncertain time. And, you know, I've lived through different, you know, cycles of uncertainty, and everyone's different, right? So if there's going to be a recession or a downturn, it's not going to feel like any others because it's different. And I think that that definitely keeps me up at night, is just not knowing what's going to happen and the effect, and not just on me, but on the people I care about, and friends and family, and in different places. You know, I'm an optimist, so I'll answer that with an optimistic way as well, which is, you know, I don't worry so much about things like recession and economy contracting as it relates to being a business person, a small business person, or a startup, because I always like to say that when you run a company like a startup, it's always a recession. You never have access to the capital and credit you want. You're always doing things from 0 to 1. It's always difficult. So, you know, the benefit is that since it's always difficult, you don't notice so much that there's a downturn. You do, like, you know, maybe you raise a bit less money, but there's a lot of advantages, by the way, to starting a company in a downturn. People,
Absolutely.
There's less fluff, less BS.
I started my most successful company in you know, a big downturn.
Yeah. Everything matters more, right? Everything matters more for the right reason.
If you had to pick one word to describe yourself, what would it be, and why would you choose it?
Well, for me, the word would be curious. You can see the books behind me. I'm running out of.
I got a backdrop, so there's. Sorry, no.
Yeah, it's not a fake.
There's lots around it is fake, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I wasn't like, this is not fake. And it's only about half the room, but both my wife and I are voracious readers. And I think if you look at not only the volume of books, but what I read, I love reading history, and they call microhistory, the history of paper and the potato, and this and that. And I love reading fiction and science fiction, and I'm just curious about other people's stories.
Currently reading.
Sorry,
what sort of book?
Yeah,
currently reading, and maybe the other question is, what business book have you read recently?
Yeah,
that you would say, go get it, kind of thing.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, the business one's easy because I recently reread Venture Deals by Brad Feld, and he's a co-author. I forget his name, and it's a book about, as the name suggests, it's kind of educating people about the terminology and the mechanics of venture capital fundraising. And what I love about the book is that it's probably more than 10 years old, but for me, it's the only book like an entrepreneur ever needs to read to learn about venture capital. So you don't need to read 10 books and 100 blog posts and 10,000 tweets. This is the only book you need to read. It's a classic. So I reread that recently, and also I'm reading The Founder's Dilemma by Noam Wasserman, which I had not read before. Shame on me. It's just an incredible book, right? Talking about all the things that founders face when they're starting their company, including like how to pick founders, So again, I'm not finished it yet, but I think it's a reference. You literally don't need to read another book. Like, if anyone's thinking about starting a company, you should read Founder's Dilemma. If you're thinking about fundraising, you read Venture Deals. And then I hope one day that I can be in there too. If you're about to pitch and you're writing a pitch deck, you read Pitching a Leap of Faith. And I haven't achieved it yet in my own self-critical kind of analysis, but I'm working on it. And then in nonfiction, I'm reading a really great book. I actually forget the title, the exact title, but it's about anxiety. And it's a kind of a holistic way to look at anxiety from the point of view, not just of, obviously like your mental and psychological kind of origins of it, but brain chemistry, diet, sleep, exercise, environmental factors. So it's something that I'm really interested in. I think it affects a lot of us. And then I read a great book called Paradise about the horrendous wildfires in California in the town of Paradise back in the day. That was it was kind of like, it's recent history, but it's just terrifying, like terrifying, scary, shocking, and still happening. So.
And I guess I can't leave Shoemaker out, which we've both read.
Yes.
Bill Foster's one, which is a really interesting story about the family we walk in. It's a great story of a family business and how someone moves through the family business kind of scenario.
Yeah, that family business started in the 1800s, right? So but it's so interesting because family businesses inherently are just unstable and interesting and entertaining for outsiders, probably not so much for insiders. But having you and I both met Joe and through Elle, my wife, and it's meeting him and seeing somebody who's been part of a globally iconic brand, and it's great. And the book I love because it was not just about boardroom backstabbing kind of business. It was about history. Right, that's what I loved about it.
Family story in there. It was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So let's conclude, because I see on my little clock that we're now hitting the 20-25 minute thing. What advice would you give to an entrepreneur that's just at that point of starting a business? What are just two gems kind of thing that you would say?
Yeah. The first one is really, follow your passion, do what you love. Yes, it's a business, but, I always say, is this whatever you're planning to do, if you're about to start, is this a business you can do for the next decade or multiple decades? And, and through all the ups and downs, not just thinking about the IPO and, being a billionaire, but are you going to enjoy the journey? If not, don't do it. There's, many other ways to make money and have fun, but number one is, it is going to be a difficult journey. So make sure it's something you're passionate about. And number two, it's about people. And I think especially at the beginning, when you're creating a founding team or you're hiring initial people or bringing on mentors, advisors, in a lot of ways you feel weak because you feel like I had nothing to offer these people. So I'll just take anyone who says yes. But it's actually the point where you should be the pickiest, because these are the people that are going to set the DNA of your business. And you, again, it's like maybe like a marriage. You're going to be married to these people. So, find people that, yes, skills, experience, industry knowledge, but number one is, can you work with them, right? Over a long period of time. And usually you get that gut feel, or you can check references, or you can try to get to know them. But I'd say passion and people.
Okay. Raymond, thank you very much. So there's some great thoughts in the last 25 minutes. That's really good. How can people get a hold of you if they're listening to this and they say, I want to talk to this guy about this or about that? How can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, I'm pretty easy to reach. Probably the easiest way is on LinkedIn, actually, because I do a lot of posting there. So you just, Raymond Look on LinkedIn. You can connect with me. I will connect with you back. You can message, but you also, I post a lot of content there. And then for things like Pitch Lab or, I post it all on LinkedIn. So that's the ideal place to reach me.
Okay. Raymond, thanks for coming on Canada's podcast. Been a great session. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.